Hi, everybody. I am Nic Marks, and I'm very happy today to be talking with Lucy Beck from A2Z Cloud. And Lucy and I have known each other, I don't know, 3, 4 years, Lucy, something like that. Oh, you're on mute. That's
See,
better.
the training didn't work. I forgot to turn off the mic. Yeah, it's about 4 years, I think, Nick.
Yeah, yes. And Uh, we've been talking since Lucy's company A2Z used Friday Pulse, and we've been talking about how we might work together actually ever since, but we're sort of starting to figure that out. But we were meeting just a few weeks ago, and no, it must be a couple of months ago, and Lucy put this phrase out in the room, which was that bad systems beat good people. And I thought that's such a good expression. We better do a webinar together about that and explore that more, because it's very much in my belief that we're very shaped by the systems that we work in, that they really, really affect our experience of work. And when systems are bad, it's much harder to feel good. And so that's the sort of discussion we're going to have today. But I think the first thing really to do is Lucy, for you to introduce yourself. So you are the CEO of A2Z Cloud. So I mean, tell us a bit about how what the business does and how someone like you gets to set up a business like that.
Well, the truth is, Nick, the bit that you don't know about me, because I'm advised the best approach in these situations is always to tell everybody something they don't know about you, is I'm actually a frustrated chemistry grad that opted for a career selling and marketing IT systems after the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up in 1986. So that's where I started.
Yeah.
And then after 24 years in corporate IT, working with really large organizations like Apple, SAP, Hummingbird, which is now part of OpenText, I'd had enough and the writing was on the wall. The fact is, you didn't see older women like me in senior positions. So I set myself up as a self-employed consultant, which is something that you see a lot since the pandemic, but perhaps saw less of way back when I first did it in 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
And that ultimately led to me founding A2Z Cloud in 2016 at the tender age of 53. So today the A2Z team is a global small business, as Daniel Priestley would describe it. It's we're a premium partner for Zoho, based out of the UK, with a wide range of clients from a wide range of industries. You know, really large organisations like ITV and Fred Olsen, through to much smaller organisations, and we employ approaching 30 people across 4 countries.
Yeah, it's quite a success story. So, and in
Mm.
a way, as you say, it is kind of unusual for a woman to be in tech and running
Mm.
this sort of thing. So, what do you think that the men were missing?
Well, I think the thing is, if you're a pushy, outspoken bloke, they think, "Wow, you're a go-getter," you know,
Yeah.
and lead us to Nirvana kind of approach. If you're a outspoken, opinionated woman, you're a B1TCH, right?
Yeah.
And it's not looked on favorably. You have to be much more political in your approach. And the ultimate thing for me was the classic. I found the blokes around me were being paid substantially more than I was, and
Yeah. So,
that really grated with me. And
yeah.
there just wasn't the opportunity, you know. So sticking to the Friday Pulse and the theme of the subject, there just wasn't the opportunity for me
Yeah. I
to
mean,
go forward, really.
it's a nonsense, isn't it, really? That
Mm,
you've still
it
got
is.
this thing brown sort of. I mean, like, 51% of the population who are just as smart and just as, it's just like, I really never get it, but it's so prevalent. I mean, I know when I run workshops and you particularly, particularly public ones, when you've got sort of a trusting environment, you set it up maybe over a few hours and you start asking people about bad experiences, then you know that if a brave woman stands up and says something, then boom, you get misogyny and much worse, so sexual harassment, all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
it's so ingrained, I think, probably particularly in the tech business, I should think.
Well, I certainly had some experiences which I'm not going to talk
Yeah,
about here, but I look at the things that I tolerated way back then in the late 90s and in the noughties.
yeah,
And I know that my daughter, who works in business, and the women around me just simply would not tolerate that kind of behavior now.
yeah,
So, and I can remember situations where I was on a trip in Barcelona with a team around me, and long story short, I was expected to go to a strip club with them all, and
yeah.
not my bag.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. Not mine either.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the main subject. Well, except that that is a bad system. Except
Yeah,
that is actually a systemic effect, of institutionalized, prejudice against women, and particularly as you
yeah.
said.
I think it's less so now. We're much more conscious of these things now,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we have the pandemic to thank us for that. Really, it's really made us think about
yeah.
who we are and how we deal with people.
Yeah, so you run a small business, but a decent sized business. These are 30 people, and I know how passionate you are about it.
Mm.
Um, and I was thinking, what did the pandemic teach you about running a business, in that way?
Oh, well, as I said, I was really very driven, and I was always thinking about growth and about profit, and very ideas driven person. I mean, my team go mad because I constantly have ideas and I constantly share them, and they don't know what they should put down and what they should pick up, because
Yeah,
today's Monday, I'm saying X. Last week you were saying A, Lucy, where do you want us to go? And I think we were lucky with the pandemic, because the nature of the way I built the business, even pre-pandemic, was that people could work from anywhere in the world. So we could just pick up our laptops and leave and go and work from home. But what I hadn't ever thought about was the impact my drive and ideas was having on people's well-being and on mental health, and how important that was. When you think about people working from home, most of us who are in our latter years, or who are family people, will have a home, will have a space to work from, we'll have people around us. But if you're in a house of multiple occupancy, you're probably working from your bedroom, and that makes things really difficult for you.
yeah,
Um, so I just had to wake up, basically. And
yeah.
Nick, meeting you at Dominic Monkhouse's workshop was a light bulb moment for me, for things turning on, when I suddenly realized everything that my senior staff around me, Helen and Sonia, were saying to me. Gosh, they were right, and I suddenly got it. I'm embarrassed to admit that it took me that long in life to understand how important it was.
Well, I think a lot of people who set up businesses, I mean, you have to be driven. In fact, I think we've joked about this ourselves. I have exactly the equal and opposite problem, and I think I'm not driven enough often.
You're
And
just driven by different things, Nick.
we're driven by different things. Yeah, yeah, very.
Mm.
So just explain a bit about, because we want to talk about systems, and we're going to talk, um, use an example particularly of IT systems, but not exclusively, because I want to come back to an example which also inspired me in this area, which actually comes from a county council that I heard speak about how they solved approached some difficult issues. But A2Z, what do you do as a business? Because what you do is, as I understand it, is you put in systems, tech systems for people.
Oh, yes. I don't know if I've got to space in half an hour to talk about what we do,
You've
but
got
yes,
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
basically what we're all about doing is helping companies adopt the modern technology platforms that are out there, that are very cost effective. In the old days, if you're a business like us, a couple of million turnover, 30 people and so on, putting in something like a CRM system was huge. It was a 6-figure plus project, and it doesn't have to be that way anymore. So what we specialize in doing is helping people look at their business processes, really, and how they measure the success of their business, and then helping them transform that business in a way that they can use it, make the most of these new technologies, and thereby reduce their costs. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to how can we help you be a more effective, more profitable, more productive team through adopting these new ways of working. Digital transformation is the umbrella film that companies would use.
And absolutely. And you can see how for businesses, you know, and what would be the smallest sort of client you work with?
A company of about 10 to 20 people. We do work with some startups.
Yeah.
You know, a startup for us, there would be one with about 5 to 10 people. Our sweet spot is definitely the 20 to 100 type employee companies where they've been doing what I did in the early years, growing their business, focused on something, and suddenly realized that they need to put some organization and structure around their systems, that they're using 20, 30, 40 different pieces of technology to support their business, and none of them are talking to each other. And in fact, later on, I'll share a quote from somebody on LinkedIn that talks about exactly that.
We should share that now. We should share that now. But I mean, you don't have to put it up. You could just read
Yeah.
it. Just read it.
Oh, I don't know if I can read it because
Well,
she's
you can
got
just
really,
you can just
really
you can
bad
just you can
language.
just bleep out that one word.
Oh, okay. So this was a lady who moved into business from journalism, and basically said, you get a message in Slack with a link to the Confluence doc to prep for a meeting on Zoom, where you take notes in Notion and track project progress on Monday.com, then update the Trello board, and you get to the end of the week, and instead of doing bleep anything, you've just moved bits of information around in 17 different databases, and each one of them has got a subscription cost of £15 a month per user. So yeah, when I woke up to this, I was actually dealing with a company out of Newcastle that analysed that they were using 18 different pieces of software, and that by moving to our recommended platform, I mean, they only had like 50 employees, they were going to save £56,000 a year in subscription. Oh, sorry, that's wrong. Save £18,000 a year in subscription fees.
Yeah, it's a
So
lot.
significant sums.
I'm wondering if anyone listening wants to put in the chat if they've got a similar experience, things about the annoyance of having to move things between different apps, and that, you know, and how that is a frustration. Because in a way, when I started talking to you, and actually very particularly when I was at this conference in Ireland recently, I just was reminded how much frustrations, you know, undermine our day-to-day experience of work. And, you know, that woman cursing about it and about how frustrating it was, but no, and expensive is a thing. But from my perspective, it's like how frustrating that is, and how that's blocking people having good experiences of work, and also you know, also being better at their work. Yeah.
Well, just think about the times that you go and the emails that you get inviting you to click through a form, or you want to sign up to download a white paper or something like that from a research site, and you start typing in your name and your email address, and then you download something and you look at it and they recommend something else to you and you want to go download that. They ask you again for your email and
Yeah.
and name and your date of birth and your inside leg measurement, and it why do I have to type this information in multiple times, and why do you need that piece of information about me? You know,
Yeah.
well-designed systems would capture that information about you over a period of time without you even realizing the picture that they were picking up of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rachel in the comments has said that would be our organization if the ops team didn't put their foot on the brakes and stop everyone running off and using this. Yeah, we had the same conversation in ours, in that, you know, we do sometimes flip between things, and which ones do we get the most value out of, and I'm also useless because, I mean, you know, like Lucy, I'm a dinosaur. Well, you understand tech, you see. I mean, I'm even not very. I mean, I do tech and I do PowerPoint, but it's like them trying to get me to comment in Trello is always a problem, you know, or use Basecamp or whatever like that. And I start going, well, I'll send you an email or something. But yeah, it's quite, it's quite hard for that. I mean, we wasn't even email when I was starting out. My first computing experience was with punch cards, so we are we are the dinosaurs, aren't we, Lucy? But
Yeah, but I'm flattered that you think I'm good at tech. My teammates, and particularly my daughter, who works in marketing, would not agree. You're so slow, Mum.
yeah, yeah. Well,
But I do have a technical bent. As I said right up front, I'm a frustrated chemist. That's where I started. So I
yeah,
do have a technical way of thinking and analyzing stuff, which I think helps.
yeah. And the world has become obviously much more digital. Everything has
Mm.
become digitalized, and I think many people listening will know that I'm working on a book at the moment, and I think this will become a book chapter actually. The bad systems beat good people, but I've already got a chapter there on what's called work intensification, and work intensification is about how much we're working harder, faster, to tighter deadlines, more 24/7. And there's a great researcher called Professor Francis Green from UCL, researcher, professor. He's actually older than you and me, Lucy. And he's been working on that for a long time. And he's can basically plot a graph which just basically shows, I don't know if it's that way or that way. I can't see which. I now never know when looking in a mirror. But anyway, is that the right way going up? Of work intensification increasing since 1990s right the way up to now. That basically people are experiencing work as faster and harder and more full on. And that isn't unnecessary. That isn't actually what should be happening. With digital transfer, it
But
should be becoming easier.
if you're writing a book on it, question number one, are we going to get a mention?
Yeah.
Question number two is, do people do it by choice? Do they do it because they think they ought to do it? I mean, there was recently a case reported in the press about Goldman Sachs staff typing on their keyboards, typing a load of rubbish because the organization was measuring activity on the keyboard as a way of capturing whether or not people were actually working, not looking at the quality of it. So it's a rhetorical question. For me, we with our technology, we can force people to log out. And sometimes we have to do that when we know somebody's on holiday and we see they're actively responding and reading things. If we think they need a break, we've got the option to log them out and turn them off and say, take a break. You need a break. You're on holiday.
That's brilliant that you do that. And I think that I once read about a Canadian company that would give people $1,000 Canadian bonus if they didn't check their emails on their way for holiday.
Wow, I'm not doing that. Can't afford that. If any of the team's on, I'm not. No, I'll come up with a different bonus.
But basically they were just so worried that people weren't switching off that they decided it was a benefit for them too, and probably it was part of their annual bonus or something. But what an inspired thing to do was to actually say no, you got off. And there's also a German company that the out of office that you get from someone is, I'm out of office. You can contact this person if you want to. This email will be deleted. In other words, when they come back from holiday, they don't have a full inbox of all this stuff they have to go through. It will be deleted. If you want me to read this, you resend it to me on Monday, when I get back.
Yeah, but it comes back. Is it a choice? Is it an employer's expectation?
Yeah.
Is it a self-imposed behavior?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're learning now
Yeah.
in 2020s, basically.
Say that again. Is it a choice? Is it
a choice of the employee?
Yeah.
Is it the employer's expectation? We as employers have to encourage, particularly Gen Z and beyond. You don't have to be on 24/7.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the third thing was that
a self-imposed behavior.
A self-imposed thing,
Yeah.
So I understand some people make the choice, but I think we have to train young people today. Yeah, you're always on your phone, but sometimes it's good to switch it off and step away.
Yeah.
That's when you do your best thinking.
Yeah. Sorry, this is an aside. We must get back to the thing, but I heard this thing about, what was it called? Quiet walking. And the radical idea was that you don't take your phone when you go on a walk. You just walk without a phone. And then they even said, you might feel anxious for the first 2 minutes, but you'll find you settle into it. And I thought, this is going for a walk. And in fact, I sometimes do take my phone because it counts my steps. And actually, I've decided to leave it at home because otherwise I do check my phone on my walk, you know. I don't know why.
Get a Fitbit.
I know. Well, that's the matter.
Anyway.
But you know, but it's just a, you know, just sort of a habit. And actually, if you do have your phone with you, we do tend to do it. So Nikki is asking here, I started counting all the platforms we had, stopped on 10 and thought, but it seems using more is necessary. What's the sweet spot and how many? How do you make them work harmoniously? Well, working harmoniously is what you do, isn't it? A2Z.
That is exactly what we want to do. Our personal nirvana in system design is two things: measuring the things that matter and never having to enter the same piece of information twice. Okay, and that's the big issue when you've got 10. And if you correctly design systems, whether you take a best of breed approach or you choose to use a platform approach like we do with Zoho, then a well-designed system should be able to pass information from one piece of software to another. Even if you're working, for example, on Facebook or on X or something like that, if somebody tags you or mentions you in a comment, we should be able to flag it up in a completely separate system and have passed through who that person is so that you don't need to manually type it in. That's just a simple scenario type example.
So I think of it in terms of friction and flow, is that you're trying to remove things which hold things back and you're trying to get things that flow better. And I know you've got a few slides to share, Lucy. So I thought maybe now would be quite good if you did that, but maybe put the airplane up and whatever else and just talk through things for 5-10 minutes. And then we are going to finish at 1:45 today because Lucy has a lunch appointment, so we need to finish then. But so we will have time for questions as well then. But maybe if you could go through those bits that you want to do and where partly where we're thinking of going together as well.
Okay, so well, there's a couple of things. I mean, when we first started talking, Nick, you were interested in, you were asking me how do we measure success from a client's perspective. Yeah. And I think it was Jack Welch from General Electric that said good results to measure are customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and healthy cash flow. And those are the only three things that you need to be good at to run a successful business. I mean, it's obviously...
You're showing us the screen now with Friday Pulse. Is that the one?
I know, I'm coming to that.
Right, that's okay, cool.
I'm coming to that. So, you know, I think he got employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction around the wrong way. So this is Friday Pulse in operation at A2Z Cloud. So one of the things I've learned to do, and I just thought I'd show, you know, what we love about Friday Pulse is twofold. You get very graphical visual feedback on how you're doing. So me as CEO, I'm constantly monitoring. I don't know if you can see my mouse. No, you can't see my mouse. Oops, running around the screen. Yeah. But it's this 85% plus engagement rate. Obviously, if everybody doesn't respond on a regular basis, you don't get good results. And then just tracking when you drop down into the amber and that sort of stuff. But it makes us think about the positive things that we've been doing, thanking each other, that sort of stuff. So I'll come back to it and we can talk about it some more.
Can you make it full screen, Lucy? Can you make it full screen?
I can make it full screen.
Making your desktop.
How's that?
That's
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how we're using it internally. This was the lady who quoted about how many different packages she was using. But to come back to something that Nick gave a clue on, this is some joined up thinking that we're working on. It's not finished yet. This, as I said in my LinkedIn post, this is big secret. It's a pitch that we're working on. But running a business is a lot like flying a plane, basically. So planes have hundreds of systems, if not thousands of systems in them. But when you boil it down, there are two things that are important: that you have enough thrust from the engine and enough fuel in your tanks to push the plane forward, and that you haven't got a heck of a lot of drag. So if you use the analogy in business, we have multiple systems, whether they're warehouse and inventory management systems, whether they're finance systems, whether they're sales or marketing. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a few things. So like marketing is the engine driving the awareness, generating the leads. The cash flow is the fuel that for that engine. And the things that act as drag are the things that we've just been talking about, the operations, keeping everyone on task and focused on the goal of the business. And so, you know, as I said, Jack Welch came up with these 3 things that you measure, and we think that employee satisfaction is one of the most important ones. Now, normally when companies are looking at doing a digital transformation project, and you go to your consultants, whether you go to Deloitte or whether you go to a small specialist organization, they'll tell you that these are the metrics that you should measure, you know. Adoption and performance, how often are people logging into the system, how long has your system been available, has it fallen over at all, you know, the reports of people using the fields that you've put there for them to use. At the end of the day, that really is not what you want to be measuring. What you want to be measuring is, has this made a difference to how satisfied employees are with the job? At the end of, there is some research from Qualtrics that says something like 60% of your staff at any moment in time are considering their future and considering leaving. They're a flight risk. And we have to reduce that flight risk. It takes a lot of time, money, and effort to bring new employees onto a team, to get them used to your systems, to get them learning their job. And if you're investing in those people correctly, what you will get is greater employee retention. As a result, they'll be doing their jobs better because they know how to do the job. And that has the downstream impact of customer satisfaction, because they'll be positive, they'll be looking for solutions when clients phone them, they'll be more inclined to handle difficult customer satisfaction situations well. So we think it all comes down to how happy your employees are at the end of the day. And we've been thinking about how to get this idea across to people. And if you think about what's happening in the world today, everybody's talking about AI, right? Automation's going to take my job. It's going to steal my job. I won't have a job soon. But when you drill down into it, the reality is less than 5% of jobs can be fully automated, right? Whether you're a bricklayer, a plasterer, whether you're a banker or a teacher or a salesperson, you know. But what we can do is we can improve people's jobs. So in sales, what's coming with AI is we could probably automate up to 45% of the job. So in other words, the majority of jobs today is worth about a day and a half, the automation that we can bring in, so that we can give you back a day and a half a week. So if we get it right, the 4-day week becomes a reality for companies, not just working from home, the 4-day week, right? Which is a concept that a lot of companies are pushing for. Another phrase that comes up, you know, the 7 most dangerous words in business. Why do you do it that way? Well, because it's the way we've always done it. And when we're thinking about digital transformation projects, one of the things we've got to do is, you know, is there a different way of achieving the same end? I'm constantly surprised by the amount of companies that come to us that want a new system, say a CRM system for managing their sales and their customer service, and they've never actually thought about what they want from that system, what they really want. So I will ask them a question. If you were stood here 3 years' time talking to me about the system we've deployed for you, what has to have happened for you to have considered it being worthwhile? And an awful lot of people will stumble around trying to answer that question. And it gets worse when I then ask them, okay, so we've kind of worked out what success means to you. How will you know when you get there? What will you measure? And the best analogy that we've been able to come up with that is Dick Frosbury. So in Olympic year, talking about high jumps at the Olympics is probably a good thing, right? So the Frosbury flop was became famous around about October 1968. If I click through on the build on this slide, up until then, there had been various different ways of doing the high jump. And it wasn't until Dick Fosbury came up with this new approach going over backwards that the record went up another 20 centimeters. So he improved on the previous world record by over 10%, which is huge. So if we can use that analogy in business when we're looking at systems and we're going to do a digital transformation project, what can we do differently that's going to raise your business to a whole different level? So we always start with process, and processes are difficult. You know, people are used to these diagrams I've got up here on the top left. You know, think about the post-it notes on a wall, classic consultancy approach. You know, okay, you've done X, what happens, Y? But what these types of diagrams don't do is they don't help you identify the information you need behind every one of those post-it notes. They don't tell you who's responsible for it. They don't tell you what the next task is. It's not visual. So we will try and come up with a visual approach to the system. And then when you start thinking about it like that, you are much more, when you think who's going to have to do this job, who's responsible for collecting that piece of information, you're automatically starting to think about the person using the system. And that's when you start thinking about the layout on the screen, how frustrating it is, where can we get that information from to save them typing it in again? How can we proactively notify them that we've got another piece of information that they should consider? Those sorts of things, because you start to see how your systems come together. And one of the phrases we like is the idea of the lazy genius. You know, motivated people are always going to find a better way of doing a job. So if your employees aren't engaged with their job, they're not going to find out a different way. When I was working in purchase to pay automation, I remember, I'm not going to mention who it was, but it was another local council had done a whole transformation project around purchase to pay. And they'd spent over £4 million to deploy, actually a lot more than that, deploying an SAP system. And they kept getting invoices in from suppliers and being put on hold by suppliers because their invoices hadn't been paid. And what happened was they just kept finding ways of working around the system to pay the invoice, so the supplier took them off stop. And the problem with that was the information wasn't going into SAP, and the next thing they know, you know, they were owing more than 4 million quid that they hadn't accounted for. So there's a lot here that you have to think about. People will find workarounds on bad systems.
Yeah.
If we've done it right, we'll be able to quote this, you know, I can spend 20% of my time thinking about better ways of improving my job.
And that really links well also to the other case study of a county council, where they had the issue where they had like 30% of their workforce, maybe even 40% of the workforce out in the field. And how did they do a digital transformation thing that just wasn't people at desk based? And they invested really heavily in tablets and things like that. And they've now reduced the amount of admin that people have to do who are like tree surgeons out there, or traffic people, or people going into social housing to, you know, do a survey of it. And they've reduced the amount of admin they've done by about 30 to 40%. And you know, that's good systems, releasing time and getting rid of frustrations.
And that's people thinking through their jobs. How can I do it better? You know, there's this famous phrase that we use, all businesses say this, our people are our greatest asset. No business never said anything else, right? But the reality is, what we're not measuring is meaningful work, recognition, appreciation, that sort of stuff. And talking about that county council, I know who you're talking about. And we've got the same issue. Companies, lots of companies are trying to get their employees to come back into the office.
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't got the systems. They feel that productivity has slipped. They feel like they're losing control. They haven't got the insight and visibility into the business that they used to have. And what we're saying is bringing people back into the office is not the way that you're going to get back that control. If you design your systems properly, you will achieve this for your employees, and you will get the increased engagement and improvement. So I know that county council, they actually put in a whole process where if people wanted to come in and wanted to stay working from home, they put a whole process in on deciding whether or not your job could be done from home, didn't they? And they built a very smart process for measuring all of that, and what a difference it's made to them.
Yeah, they've set up this amazing thing. They called it blended working, and could they do it? And so they decided they had to create a fair system. I mean, I think anyone who knows our work well, we always talk about be fair as a really important criteria to happiness at work. And very, very transparent. And basically the system was that firstly, you had to apply if you wanted to work blended, and not every job was able to, because obviously if you're a tree surgeon out there doing something, you can't do it from home. So you had to apply whether you could do it and how much. So that was assessed. But then once the role that you're in was assessed that it was possible to have what they call blended working, they then went to your home to see whether you had the right facilities at home, and obviously supported you so that you had the right ergonomic desk, that you had the right Wi-Fi, you had whatever. And some people, it just wasn't possible for them to do it because of situations at home rather than because of situations at work. But then they could also put in the VPNs correctly. They could also put in all the security. There's council, they need to have secure systems, everything like that. So they were able to create a system, and they did this beautiful flow diagram, and then basically you got the result of it, and then there was an appeals process, that actually if you wanted to appeal, you could do it. And they had this 12-step process, and she presented it as a snake rather delightfully on the screen. And I can't remember exactly how many. I think 400 people can now, out of 900, can do blended working. The main criteria was that she's had not one complaint about the process. Not one complaint. Everyone's been through it. No one's complained about it. That is a great system.
It is a fantastic system, and well done her for designing such a brilliant system. And I don't know whether or not they actually measure it, but little push for you, Nick, and your team. At the end of the day, Friday Pulse allows you to measure many of these things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, it's a fantastic thing to do that. And if you can do that, so where we're going with our approach, and if anybody's on this webinar and wants to hear more about it, we'll have finished putting it into something that we can share more in a more concrete fashion in a 2-3 weeks time. But what we want to do is come up with metrics for the unmeasurable. And the idea that we're working on is working with Nick to do his kickoff survey. So if you go to the Friday Pulse website, you can do a survey for your company at no cost, and it's anonymous. But what it does allow you to do is to start seeing where the frustrations in your company are by team or by department or division, however you choose to view it. And we would argue, okay, that's where you need to start, in that area of frustration. That's the lowest hanging fruit. Let's start with that little area or encapsulated area of your organization, and get people engaged in fixing the problems if you have in that area. And then through that engagement, they will help you identify how you can improve that process, what the root cause is. So going back to my chemical engineering days, we talk about a root cause analysis. Ask why 5 times. Why are you frustrated? How can we improve it? And when you do that, you give people a sense of empowerment, that they can take back some control over their jobs. They can have a positive impact on the systems that they're using. And then you go back to Friday Pulse at the end to measure, have we made a difference? Has the frustration score changed in another area of the organization? Because the danger is, of course, that if you fix something in one area, you'll have a downstream impact on another. The classic example I use is for commerce companies. If we can improve your website in your e-commerce so that you can get loads more orders, can your warehouse cope with shipping that 100 more orders a day, for example? And quite often the answer is no. So you have to do this joined up holistic thinking between the lot.
Yeah. And what we're exploring
That's my last slide.
No, that's it. You could stop sharing now, and we'll go back and we'll do some questions. And you've got a nice picture of London still there. Is that your screen? Is that your screen? Yeah.
Stop sharing. Yeah, sorry, not used to Zoom. Zoho meetings is it for me, or webinars?
Yeah. So, and actually, we'll pick up your question, Nick, in just a second. But what we're working towards is like jointly pitching for work. Well, Lucy pitching for work, but adding us in, which is that, you know, where we measure the impact on employee happiness of the digital transformation. And of course, if you measure it as it's going along, you'll see where the squeeze points are, because they're bumpy rides often, aren't they, digital transformation projects? And so you need to know quickly if something isn't working well. But and that's something we're working on together to do together later this year. So that's actually very exciting. Nikki says here, so basically we're in Q&A because Lucy needs to go in about 5 minutes, don't you? Yes. And
sorry, yeah.
It's all right. I can stay on. Angela, if you could quickly put up the poll, just because we like to just ask people how the webinar was for them. But please do put any questions in the chat. It's probably the easiest thing to do, rather than go to the Q&A. But just taking yours, Nikki. In the business I work for, we measure everything except what's important. Employee satisfaction. We try, but it's 2 yearly survey. Do you mean that's every 2 years or every 6 months? But probably every 2 years. There's quite a lot of people that do that. It's amazing. I did something recently, and I think it was nearly 50% of people measure less than once a year in their organizations. We do quarterly, we do weekly. We will start later this year launching a monthly version of the tool as well, to try and get the sweet spot for like how you keep in touch of these things. Every 2 years, but long, painful. Yeah, that's really not good, Nikki. Basically, if I look at my data on, there's something which is called item response theory, you can see whether people are using the scales correctly. Once you get over about 30 questions, people just start going 3, 4, 3, 4. They start giving you less attention, so you get less information. Lucy, thank you so much for sharing your story and everything else, and actually just about, you know, I think where we started, and it's really, really important to get to this, is that, and what I loved about this woman from this county council, we don't have permission to say what county council she's in. I don't know, county councils get a bit funny. We're working on that, whether we can make it a case study. So, but what I was at a wellbeing conference, and, you know, I was doing the keynote on sort of why happiness is serious business, and they had some case studies, and, you know, they had a sort of normal case study from a rail company that were doing sort of stuff on the health and well-being of people. It was absolutely fine, fitness. They had another one which was from a very rich tech company, and they were sort of throwing all the money at it. And then this woman got up from a county council and she talked about systems, and I just thought, blooming marvelous, because that is what's going to affect people's day-to-day happiness so much more. And that, you know, and that there's lots of research that shows, I mean, you know, I talk about there being 5 ways to happiness at work, which is about the culture, you know, which is connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire. And if you want to do a questionnaire on it, I've just put in there, and you can do that yourself on Friday 1, it's there. But we also have a weekly tool. Why do we have a weekly tool? Because of friction and flow, because like what's going well in people's weekly work, build on it. What isn't going well, tackle it. And I think that's what you particularly enjoy about Friday Pulse, isn't it, Lucy?
Yeah, so it's only 5 questions. We're currently doing it weekly. We're one of the companies will probably go monthly when that is available. But the first thing it asks you is there anybody you want to thank? And what I appreciate about it is that we give people from Thursday afternoon to Monday morning to respond, because can't always guarantee to be around on a Friday. But it makes me stop at the end of the week and think, what have I achieved this week? And it's very difficult sometimes to not to be drawn down by your to-do list and everything that you've got to do. So when you're forced to stop and think, well, who do I want to thank? who did something great for me this week or helped me. And I particularly like the fact that we can now also thank people externally to the organization. It's not just internally. So that's quite good. And I think that after you've done that thank, what do you want to celebrate? You know, so we would celebrate the end of deploying a project, for example. Or we might want to celebrate a particularly big order, or we might want to celebrate an employee's been with the team for 5 years or something like that. And then the frustrations, there's a little bit of training. It's very tempting for people to put in on frustrations. Well, so-and-so from accounts really wound me up this week. Actually, what we're really looking for is encouraging people to share why they couldn't do their job this week, or what about their job frustrated them. And there's definitely, it's hard because if you've got something going on outside of work, it's hard not for that to impact the way that you respond to that question. But that's real life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so if that is coming through on your Friday Pulse questionnaire, then, you know, it's good that you understand that people are in the doldrums today because we lost the football last night. And just to add to that, is flipping raining, cats and dogs outside, you know.
Well, thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you. If anyone else has got any other questions, please do post them, but we must let Lucy go. And thanks very much, Lucy, for your time today. And
no problem.
Look forward to working more together.
All right. Cheers, Nick. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
And yeah, everyone else, thank you very much for joining. And I hope you enjoyed it. And the next webinar that I'm going to do will be a solo. I'm getting in a rhythm of doing one interview, one solo. And the next one will be on stuck in okay. Are you stuck in okay? And how okay isn't really okay. And so some data and some stories on that. And it'd be nice to have a really good interactive session, whether either you're stuck in okay, or you feel people in your team or you work with are, and what we can do to nudge ourselves out of that. So thanks very much for joining us. We will put the date of that in the follow-up email, and also any other information that we have. So thanks for joining us all today. Bye.